Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the SimNFL show, real talk about fake sports. I am your host and commissioner. You can call me Pierce. Today, we are discussing all of the Week 11 action in the Pro Sim over at simfba.com. Come check us out on the website and on Discord. We would love to have you. So today, as usual, we're going to go over all the stats and game summaries of Week 11. There were a lot of blowouts, but a lot of really good games that we'll talk about in detail. And then we'll wrap things up with my players of the week and look at the current standings this far in the season. And then we're going to continue a segment that we started last week. Last week we did the AFC. This week we're going to do the NFC. And we're going to look at veterans with expiring contracts. So these are big name players who will be the big targets during extension season. And if they do not sign an extension with their current team, they'll be big names in free agency. So we'll be looking over those names and teams. And then we will wrap everything up by previewing the action ahead for Week 12. So first game I want to highlight in detail was the Philadelphia Eagles defeating the Carolina Panthers 34-27. So Carolina jumped out to the opening lead in this one, 10-0. But the Eagles forced a couple of turnovers that led to some scores before halftime and got them to tie it up. And then they got the ball in the second half, Philadelphia did, and immediately scored on their first possession, taking their first lead of the game. Carolina battled back throughout the third quarter, ultimately retaking the lead 20-17. Then Philadelphia had a field goal to tie it. And then after another Link interception, Greg LeMay had a 51-yard touchdown run to give the Eagles back the lead. Link threw another interception, but the Panthers were able to get a defensive stop, get the ball back, and down by a touchdown. They drove 7 plays, 84 yards, and so just with under a minute left, were able to tie the game at 27. It went to overtime. Both teams had possessions. Both teams punted. The Eagles failed on a fourth down conversion, giving the Panthers excellent field position, but then a huge sack between Christian Pilardi and Whit Wilson pushed the Panthers out of field goal range, and they had to punt a second time. So Aaron Poole took over again. He hit Matthew Lee for a 31-yard completion, and then 4 plays later he hit Gilberto Silva for his second touchdown of the game. That was a 38-yarder and was the game winner. So Eagles came out of this one 34-27 was the overtime win, and turnovers were the big story there. Poole and Link both with 3 touchdown passes, but Link with 3 interceptions as well. So turnovers and then sacks as well. Poole got sacked 6 times and Link 7 were the big story in this one. So high-scoring game, back-and-forth game, but ultimately it was the big defensive plays and a couple of big stops that proved to be the difference in this one. We had a tight contest in the AFC North, finishing with a very AFC North score of 13-3. This one was scoreless until the second quarter when Baltimore missed a 36-yard field goal, and that gave Pittsburgh good field position to drive down for their one touchdown of the game. Robert Morris hitting Paul Garul. And then Baltimore got it back right before halftime, but threw an interception. Ultimately, in this game, Baltimore had 5 drives into Steeler territory, and they ended with a punt, a missed field goal, a chip shot field goal from 19 yards out. They got all the way down to the 2-yard line before being stopped. Another short punt and another missed field goal. So 5 trips into Steeler territory, only 3 points. So the Ravens finally getting on the board and breaking their shutout streak, but not enough to win the game. Stanley Piper held to 36 yards on 10 touches. And Robert Morris able to lead his team to victory with 200 all-purpose yards, passing and rushing. Did throw a couple of picks, but the defense was able to clamp down, keep the Ravens out of the end zone, and give the Steelers the win. In a wild NFC East game, the Commanders came out ahead of the Giants 47-30. This one was much closer and more exciting than you might think of looking at that final score. Washington had a 12-0 lead early after a field goal, and then a pair of sacks, which led to a safety. And then after the free kick, gave them good field position, driving down for a touchdown. So 12-0 lead. But then Morrison threw interceptions on his next 3 consecutive drives, which led to 2 Giant touchdowns and a chip shot field goal. 1 extra point was missed, so that gave the Giants lead 16-12. Washington drove down right before halftime, took the lead back, and then things got really interesting in the second half. The first 4 drives of the second half, 2 for each team, were touchdown drives. So Washington extended their lead, the Giants closed it again, extended again, closed again. So after that run of scores, it was 33-30. But Lamar Johnson had a couple of crucial picks in the fourth quarter. The first gave the Commanders some breathing room with a touchdown, 40-30. And then the last one kind of killed any hope of a comeback. The Commanders added 1 final touchdown in garbage time after a failed Giants 4th down conversion deep in their own territory. So this one was a 3-point game deep into the fourth quarter, and the Commanders just pulled away at the end there. A wild day for Jerome Morrison with 4 touchdown passes but 4 interceptions as well. Lamar Johnson, likewise, 4 touchdowns, 2 on the ground, 2 through the air, but 3 interceptions and was sacked 9 times. So wild game, lots of offense, lots of sacks and turnovers, lots of big plays on both sides of the ball. Giants putting up a fierce fight, but Commanders keeping their unbeaten season alive with the victory. Another game that was very close for a long time. This one was a tight 7-7 game late into the third quarter before Hickson caught fire, completed passes of 17 and 40 yards, and then finally a 9-yarder for a touchdown to give them the lead. After a Chicago 3-and-out, Hickson completed a 29-yard pass to Charles Brown, and then there was a 15-yard unsportsmanlike penalty on the Bears, giving them free yards and led to a 1-yard Raiders touchdown. Chicago then drove 78 yards in 10 plays trying to come back, but they were held to a field goal. That made it 21-10. And then in the fourth, Chicago drove down again, got all the way to the 10-yard line, again was held to a field goal. So that did make it technically a 1-score game at 21-13. And they even forced the Raiders to punt. But they got stopped around midfield, had the punt. Vegas drove down, actually missed a field goal at that point. But Chicago could not capitalize and got stopped on 4th down with under a minute to go. And then Lewis threw 1 more interception on the final play. So the failed 4th down conversion led to another Raiders touchdown with under a minute to go, and then Lewis threw an interception on the final play. So both Lewis and the Bears in general looking better than the final stats might have you believe. That was a 1-score game right down to the wire. And Lewis doing everything for his team, 273 yards to the air, another 71 yards rushing, plus a rushing touchdown. But the combination of James Hickson and James Blank, too much for the Bears to handle, and the Raiders come out the victors in this one. So the Broncos and Packers had a great game on Monday night. This one also started off quiet. It was a 6-6 field goal battle into the second half. But then Denver got good field position after a short Packers punt and drove 50 yards for a touchdown. Got the ball back, promptly threw an interception, and Garibay threw a touchdown pass to Nwachukwu. He completed a 35-yarder to him and then a 27-yard touchdown pass. Denver returned the ensuing kickoff to the Green Bay 36-yard line. 3 plays later, London connected with Grady for a 28-yard touchdown. That made it 20-13 in the Broncos' favor. But Garibay, again, with that connection to Nwachukwu, They connected on passes of 19 yards and then a 35-yard touchdown, tie the game at 20. And then London threw another interception, but the defense held to preserve the tie. Denver drove all the way to the Green Bay 32, looking for the go-ahead score, but were held scoreless. Green Bay took over, and unfortunately Garibay threw a pick six to Darrell Lee, leading to another Broncos lead. Green Bay could not do anything with their final possession, and then their punt was blocked. So Denver drove in for the dagger, which was a final touchdown run, leading to a 34-20 final score. So again, technically it goes in the books as a 2-touchdown victory, but it was very close up to the fourth quarter. Packers picking off London 3 times, really making the most of their opportunities. And Nwachukwu, 11 catches, 233 yards, and a pair of touchdowns. Manish Watson with 2 interceptions as well. Hung with the Broncos for a long time, but then the pick six and the blocked punt, the 2 big plays that led to the defining scores in this one. As for the rest of the games around the league, Jacksonville beat up on Houston 41-12. Matt Howard had 4 touchdown passes in the game. Similarly, Miami had no trouble with Tennessee. 40-10 was the final there. Miami sacked Wayne Reimer 6 times en route to victory. Tampa Bay came out ahead of the Jets 31-14. Max Smith had 3 rushing touchdowns to pace the Buccaneers. Bruno Hansen had 211 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns, defeating Atlanta 35-17. Similarly, Richard Bianchi had a great day, 250 total yards and a touchdown, as Detroit came in ahead of Kansas City. Christian Sinak had 368 yards and a couple touchdowns for Minnesota. So even though the defense allowed 191 yards rushing to Arizona, Minnesota came out with the victory there. San Francisco's defense was the big story in their game. They held New Orleans to under 150 yards and had a couple of takeaways while pitching a shutout. Only gave up, the only points New Orleans scored was their defense, registering a safety, so 13-2 was the final there. Rams all over Seattle, 31-7. Anthony Larry, 255 receiving yards to pace all receivers in Week 11. Had a pair of touchdowns as well. And then on Sunday night, a big surprise, New England blanking Buffalo 40-0. They scored 24 of those points in the first quarter alone, and they held Asensio to 6 completions on 31 attempts for only 37 yards for the entire game. So that leaves us with our players of the week. Matt Howard getting the nod as the quarterback for this week with those 4 touchdowns and 335 yards. Bianchi and Hansen, as I just mentioned, having phenomenal days on the ground for Detroit and Dallas, respectively. And then Nwachukwu, 233 yards and a couple of touchdowns in a fantastic game for him. On the defensive side, Brett McPhail and Robert Miller, 2 linemen who had great days, 2.5 sacks apiece. McPhail also added a forced fumble and a recovery to his totals. Mark Soto of Philadelphia had 12 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks, and a forced fumble, doing everything for the Eagles. And then finally, Darrell Lee of Denver with that huge pick six to turn the tide on Monday night against the Packers. Those are my players of the week for Week 11. So this is where we stand currently. Cincinnati with the week off, still in the top seed at 8-1-1. But Denver bringing up the pace at 9-2, right behind them. Miami and Tennessee still holding on to the leads in their division. And then we have a trio of 6-win teams in the wildcard spots. Cleveland with 3.5 losses, just ahead of Vegas with 4 losses, and Pittsburgh with 5. So a lot still to shake out in the seeding there. And then the Chargers and the Jets just behind them, sitting at 500, still very much in the playoff hunt, only a half a game behind the Steelers and a game behind the Raiders. In the NFC, the story remains Washington and the LA Rams holding at 10-0. The Rams have actually clinched their division. Their closest competition has 8 losses, so they are guaranteed to win the West after only Week 11. Green Bay still holding on to the lead in the North, and then Carolina, even at 5-6, still the division leader in the South. Dallas and Philadelphia still strong wildcard contenders out of the East, 8-2 and 7-3 respectively, and then Chicago, despite the loss, still holding on to that final spot at 7-4, and still awaiting their week off. Detroit is just ever so slightly behind them at 6-4, but still controls their own destiny. And then the Giants, even being in the basement of the East at 5-5, still worthy of being in the playoff picture. And Tampa Bay gets their first mention, as they are only a half game behind Carolina in the South, 4-6 compared to 5-6 for Carolina. So that race is still undecided. So last week we looked at the AFC. Today we are going to look at the NFC. And the offensive picture in the NFC is wild. As you can see, there are a huge number of 80-plus players who are on their final contract years. So a lot of money probably going to be coming out during extension season to keep some of these players. Certainly the Rams have quite the conundrum with Anthony Larry, Scott Baldwin, Kerry Slombaugh, all those offensive weapons, all on expiring contracts. And then Sung Liu, their starting left tackle as well, who's an 84 overall. Washington, of course, having a couple names on this list, notably linemen Charles C.A. and William Greer. Need to figure out both of those. And then the other big names, of course, a quarterback. Joseph Garibay is going to have a big payday for Green Bay. And then Russell Barnes, both of them getting big paydays, but Russell Barnes, being only in his fifth year, I think is going to see a big extension number as well. The only name on this offensive list still in prime progression territory. So his overall could very much be the equal of any of these others, including Matthew Madden, who is making, I think, around $20 million this year. As the top paid wide receiver. We will see if he keeps that crown or if Barnes or someone else takes it from him in the coming years. On the defensive side, it's a little more slim, but still some big names of note. Of course, edge rusher Aaron Stokes for Carolina. Carolina, no stranger to big contracts, and they could see another one here. Robert Miller, of course, another Washington name on the list, 84 overall. As well as Minnesota's interior linebacker Gordon Wilburn, also an 84. Should see big numbers from him. But the real name that jumps out to me here is got to be Brandon Schroeder of the Seattle Seahawks. An 84 overall in his fourth year. He could be a 90 this year by the time progressions are run. He was +4 last year and +6 the year before, I believe. And he's got 2 more growth years left. So could be into the mid-90s by the time he's done. Could be setting the bar for a long time in terms of highest overall. So I think 12 to 14 million a year is certainly in the realm of possibility for what his contract could look like. Obviously, we won't know until the values come out and the extension offers start to roll in. But that's going to be a big one, I'm pretty sure. So next week is week 12, which means it is Sim Thanksgiving. So we have a Thursday triple header, as is tradition. Of course, we start with our hosts in Detroit. They'll bring in Chicago. So the final playoff seed is on the line as these two rivals go head-to-head in Detroit. We have another division matchup in the afternoon with the Giants going to Dallas. Dallas trying to keep pace with Washington, a couple games behind the undefeated Commanders in the East. And then Thursday night, we have our AFC matchup, which is Tennessee at Pittsburgh, two playoff hopefuls going to go head-to-head. Excited for that one. And then, so it'll be somewhat of a light Sunday because we still have bye weeks and then we have 3 Thursday games. But definitely looking forward to seeing the Jets at Miami. The Jets still very much alive in the playoffs and trying to keep pace. And then in the afternoon, we have Vegas at the LA Chargers. A couple of West teams duking it out there. And then we have a couple of interesting primetime matchups. I say interesting in the case that you might get to go to bed early for these, because we have the 0-10 Arizona Cardinals at the 10-0 LA Rams on Sunday night. Don't know who made that schedule, but that could be a game. And then Monday night we have Houston at Cincinnati. Houston coming into the game at 2-8 against that excellent top in the AFC squad of Cincinnati. Hiram Moran getting some primetime action. We will see how he does under the lights in that one. But that is everything I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching. Good luck next week and have fun.